Great. Thanks very much, James. Thanks to everyone for turning up today. It's a great crowd and great to see you all here. I hope you all got a copy of our handout, which is really going to kind of form the backbone of what it is I want to talk about today. So what I want to do really is, first of all, I suppose, give due respect to, obviously our funders, wherever they are, is this being recorded? Thank you to the NPP for funding this project, which I think is exactly as James mentioned, trying to focus a light on an area that has heretofore been relatively uncovered. So thank you to the partners, obviously to the Western Development Commission, to our partners Steed in Craigavon in Northern Ireland, Kemmy University and Vasterboten. But thanks also to Aisling Murta and Jenny Dagg and David Kelly, who helped bring all this data together. And that's really what I want to talk about now. If you'll permit me beforehand, I want to give a bit of a contextualization because I think it's important in terms of finding out what it is that's really inspired this work. Before I go on, get into the meat of presenting the data. And the data I'm going to present in two ways, and that's really looking at the dispersal of the creative economies across the peripheral regions of Europe, before looking at culture and culture indexing, which is, I think, a very exciting area that we are getting into. I want to wrap it up by talking and focusing on these two key issues of place and authenticity, which really are the competitive and the comparative advantages that we in peripheral regions have to offer. I introduced this talk by introducing the way I introduce introductions to economic geographies. When people say, what's economic geography about? And I say, this is what economic geography is about. Over the last 200 years, obviously, we've been undergoing some massive transformations. Nicely depicted here by Hans Rosling and their visualization of what you see on the left-hand axis is life expectancy versus our horizontal axis, which is GDP. And that's basically showing over 200 years the countries across the world moving from the bottom left up to the top right-hand corner. This is what we're calling progress. And, you know, it is hard to... I'd advise you to go on to Gapminder and have a look at it. It's very interesting data visualization. But the way we describe it, of course, there's lots of different terminologies that are bounded about, lots of different isations and lots of different isms that we're trying to describe this development over the last 200 years. And how it is that we are placing, and the context that this provides for the Creative Edge project is very interesting. It's very interesting because really, for me, as an economic geographer, I'm very interested in the ideas of place and the ideas of culture. And it's really these two things, culture and place, that have come together and really are the founding stones of what it is that we're looking at here in the Creative Edge project. And I mean, when you look at the literature, what it is and what the literature is saying about our social and economic development over the last 200 years is really questioning how it is and how it is impacting on culture and how it is impacting on place. And a lot of the work really points to the negatives. It's the idea that, industrialization and urbanization and these massive phenomena are having huge impacts that are seen as, antithetical to artistic creation, antithetical to culture. And that what we're doing in the process of this, of increasing development is we're turning our back on culture and we're turning our back on place. And, we have lots of different examples of artistic movements that are trying to capture this. In terms of place and in terms of our connectivity to place, we seem to be moving further and further away from what it is that ties us to our land. And you're seeing that throughout the 19th century. You're seeing it throughout the 20th century at increasing rates, going through all these technologies that we're using, right up to this fantastic technology of PowerPoint and ICTs, which is leading to this kind of hyper-virtual world where we're interconnected and we're not place-based. And you have theorists talking about ideas of placelessness, of eternal sameness when it comes to cultural production, of the idea at the same time throughout the 19th century and the 20th century, of the evolution of industry, the evolution of Fordist practices, moving into the culture industry and really kind of creating a manufacturing of culture. And this is, probably best kind of seen in the likes of, the Hollywood machine, which is producing culture, as a commodified product. At the same time, place is again being eroded consistently, and we're questioning our idea of really how it is that we're further tied to place. And a lot of this stuff is very, very compelling stuff and makes good reading. When we take a step back from it for a second, you do have to question the nature of our connectivity to culture, the nature of our connectivity to place. Excuse me. And you see that when we're talking about culture, in actual fact, when you go back to Greco-Roman times, you're talking about a cultural economy back then. You're talking about people interacting with culture through commodification, through commercialization, through the exchange of goods, participating in culture through the commodified economy. At the same time, you can talk about place and see that, yes, it does seem to be that we're living in an ever increasingly globalized world. But one fact that remains quite true in all of that is that place in other elements seems to be becoming much, much more important. And you'll see that through the likes of these kind of examples. When you're talking about control and innovation and talking about high-level value added, you hear Richard Florida has mapped patent production. So this is, an innovation metric to see where it is. And you see that the world isn't flat and isn't the same, but in actual fact, it's quite spiky. So when you bring these two elements of culture and place together, you'll see that the creative economy is an ideal kind of lens through which to look at them. That both of them are intimately bound up in the creative economy. Culture and place are fundamental to the creative economy. This is part of what David Harvey would call flexible postmodernism. And what we're seeing is an increasing intensification of the economic significance and symbolic content of commodified culture, as well as a renewed importance of place. So the creative economy, which is what we're here to talk about today, it exists. It exists in lots of different ways, and there's lots of different health warnings in terms of how it is we're defining it. It is quite ambiguous. It is difficult to define. This was an animation that scrolls through the lists of where it is that we in this project are looking for the creative economy. We have a list of broadly 27 NACE codes at which companies are categorizing themselves as. Now, it's difficult, and it is difficult, and it warrants further and further drilling down. But at the same time, when it is that we're coming to define this economy, it's probably easier to do it through identifying the key traits that bind the industries that are part of this economy. So the industries that are part of this economy have cultural content as key kind of identifiers in the product that they're offering. The markets for these creative and cultural goods are extremely uncertain and highly competitive. New technologies are transforming this economy at a very rapid rate, and there's almost a pull and a push from these new technologies. A pull in the sense that new technologies is lessening the barriers to entry for lots of these creative industries, so that it's now possible for people in their bedrooms to record broadcast quality content. At the same time, you're seeing new technology bring about an era of replicability. And we're seeing that now through the copyright industries, which have been fundamentally transformed over the last 10 years. We see it in terms of the likes of music, we see it in terms of publishing, and increasingly through technological evolution and the advent of 3D printing, we're going to see it move into the product world again. Labour. Labour is there's a dichotomous look there between creative industries being very high intellectual capability, huge amount of intellectual property going into it, and on the whole other side of things, a massively labour-intensive process. But throughout it all, I suppose, what it is that's key to them is these ideas, these key ideas that I want to focus on today of authenticity and place being absolutely fundamental. And you're seeing it, and you see it, and it's not just economic geographers talking to themselves, trying to convince each other how important place is. It is more broadly, it's more broadly evident. You see it, from the likes of this quote here by Molich, who is a key thinker in terms of design, talking about place and place branding and about things being of particular places. And that's really a good starting point to think about what it is we're talking about when we're talking about the creative economies in peripheral areas. You're seeing this notion of authentic offering and inauthentic offerings. And we've saw over the last couple of weeks this I don't know if you heard the radio ad, I think from the Irish Food Board, about these sausages from Ballygo, Cludy, Bloody, Mahooly. It was a good ad anyway. And there's this notion that people are out there trying to brand, trying to authenticize products that essentially aren't what they aren't, and the massive backlash that there's been against that. So these industries are extremely place sensitive in lots of regards. They use place as inspiration, they use place as an input, place in terms of active agglomeration and economies of scale, place in terms of market, and place in terms of performance. And there's lots and lots of ways that we see this happening. Much of what they offer, is exactly contrasting that which went in the 20th century. It's contrasting the mass-produced routine knives. They are producing products that are culturally inspired, products with narratives, products with symbolic content. You can't mention the creative industries without talking about the phenomenon of clustering and how it is that these industries do tend to cluster. And much of the work that's out there looking at how these industries have clustered has naturally enough, I suppose, to some extent, taken place in an urban context. And that is another departure point for us looking at the creative edge and the way that we're doing it. To move that discussion beyond simply urban areas and to talk about it in broader regional and perhaps even rural contexts. But you can see the rationale for clustering, and it is all about feeding off these positive spillovers in terms of supply, labour, performance, networks, economies of scale, and the branding of place. So here we are, and that's our website there, which is really what's going to form what I want to talk about over the next couple of slides. And I'd invite you all to look at it. It's brand new. It's up there, to be honest. We haven't even had the time ourselves to really explore it in the detail that's necessary. And the detail that will give it due reading. But you see here we have the dispersal of creative industries across our region. This is our western region. Here we have the seed area of Northern Ireland. Here we have Västerbotten in Sweden and our Tornio region in Finland. And this is our list of companies that we're considering creative industries. You can break it down, and what you do is you can go through our website and you can click particular NACE codes identifying certain industrial types and seeing how it is, those creative industries that are more technology oriented. They tend to have a particular geography that's probably more, about, I suppose, agglomerating and locating in and around the major urban areas in our regions. And that's pretty much what you would expect. In terms of creative expression, you're talking about the creative arts, the audio-visual industry, has a wider dispersal, one that kind of tends to not be so urban-based. And that becomes even wider again when we're talking about creative application, which are much more craft, much more creative maker industries, which have a much broader dispersal in terms of their geographic location. And this is all very interesting. And again, you can bring it all down, you can bring your data down, you can focus in on particular subsectors and particular industries, like the audiovisual industry, an instance here, where you see if you focus in on Ireland, you're seeing, yes, a relative presence there in Galway County and in Donegal, T.G. Cahir, no doubt, explaining quite a bit of that. But what we've done is, again, identifying clusters by focusing in further in the context of Galway and identifying Ballinahone, which is exactly where T.G. Cahir is located, and a number of independent presences in and around there. So that's it, and I would invite you to go on to our website and explore that further. Now for the second part, which is really talking about place and how it is that this project is trying to reinterpret place, to question what it is that can make places successful and how it is you can succeed in a creative economy era. And one of the ways that we're doing this is through an indexing of culture. And again, as with the creative economy part, there is a health warning that goes with this, and that we're not fully there yet in terms of what we have up on the website, but I would invite you to look at it. This is our creative economy map. You've seen that already. When you map our cultural infrastructure on top of that, you see, not by any means a perfect correlation, because we haven't, I suppose, adjusted the measures to really correlate or, to map against each other. But you're seeing a relationship there in terms of infrastructural provision. You provide the cultural infrastructure, the creative economy is more likely to be present. So we have a number of metrics here, and our index of culture involves a lot of metrics. And we have two here, which we're calling festivals and events, and the second one is spaces and facilities. When you bring it down again to a particular sector, it becomes hopefully a little bit more evident. And again, I'm not talking about causation, I'm just talking about correlation. I'm not saying that it's because of this that certain things are happening or not, but I think that warrants much further investigation before we go along and make those claims. But at the same time, you are seeing a high degree of correlation between mapping things like infrastructure with regards studios, with regards cinemas, with regards any number of film festivals in regions, and seeing how vibrant their audiovisual sector is as a result of that. And this is important. This is important stuff because it differs considerably from the traditional ways that we have been looking at place and how places succeed. When you look at the traditional indices of place competitiveness, you're talking about very hard, very quantitative facts. And what we're trying to do, I suppose, here is move to the more qualitative and bring in more qualitative facts and see how it is that they relate to a place's positioning. So what I've done here, and we have brought this data together for County Galway as a first instance, and basically to demonstrate it. And what you're seeing in terms of Galway's cultural infrastructure and how it is made up. Now again, further down the line, you would weight these categories, and that's exactly what we intend to do. But in terms of an absolute view, what it is in terms of Galway's cultural presence, you're seeing things like cultural support bodies, 28, spaces and facilities, 164. And this is just around the county of Galway. And getting all these indices together to bring up what is a cultural index and to map it, to make it look like this. And that would be an animation, but it's not. To map it to, I suppose, weight it, and then to find out the cultural significance of your place. And knowing the cultural significance of a place, I would argue, is fundamentally important to knowing the ability of that place to compete economically, to compete socially. Anyways, I suppose I don't get to wrapping up, and I'd say why it is important. Why it is important is if you go out there, and that's really, this is the departure point, so in lots of ways this presentation finishes up where I should have started. when you go out there and you look at how places are acting in the modern global economy, they are trying to position themselves relative to other places. It's those places that don't focus on their authentic offering. It's those places that negate their cultural embodiment that don't seem to be as successful. And I'll bring that all down to this slide here. This slide here is a representation of a bit of a textual analysis of economic policy, spatial policy and industrial policy in this box here on the right. And you're seeing terms like productivity, labor, performance. In the box on the right, what you're seeing there is, again, a textual analysis of questions put to companies and representatives of companies and institutions, asking them about what it is that's important about place. And you're seeing very different language being used, very different language being used. And in the main, what people tend to talk about in terms of either locating a company or locating an institution is focusing on these softer factors, not on the quantitative factors that have garnered all the attention heretofore. So, in summation, the objective has been to contribute, I suppose, to the contemporary debate on economic and social development, identify the presence of the creative economy in peripheral areas. And that's important. I mean, that's not just important for policymakers, it's important for practitioners as well. I mean, we have, in lots of ways, engaged with creative industries, asked them what it is that's important. Creative industries in peripheral areas tend to not know who it is what it is that people down the road from them are doing and how it is that it could possibly relate and in some ways help them in terms of what it is that they themselves are doing. And that's important, and hopefully that's what is exactly the Creative Edge project is setting out to do. And reinterpreting place and the key factors that contribute to place making. So to the end of providing evidence of the scope of the sectors and the subsectors across our 4 geographies, for practitioners, as I said, and for planners in terms of policymakers, to contribute to the policy debate on placemaking by indexing culture across regions. And this is important. There's a quote there from Vice President of Hewlett-Packard, who talks about, them not being so concerned about tax incentives and whatnot. And of course you can take this in whatever way you want to take it, but that their real focus is on where the talent is. They want to be where the talent is. And look, we're replete with it. So the examples being Google, examples again being, EA Games here in Galway, talking about coming to Galway because they knew they could attract the right kind of worker to the place that they're in. So the attractiveness of a place then becomes key, and that, while being quite simple, involves a massive turnaround in terms of spatial planning. Spatial planning heretofore has been about creating places that are attractive to jobs, whereas in actual fact what we need to do is create places that are attractive to people, and then those places will become attractive to jobs. Okay, thanks very much.